Hello and welcome to this new After Effects tutorial about 3D motion tracking. So today I want to show you how you can track a 3D motion with the built-in After Effects tracker, like in my example file here. So today I will show you how to track this motion of this footage clip here and bring in some text in 3D space. We have some nice parallax going on in this clip. For example, we can see the front part of this skyscraper, and when I go a bit forward in time, you can see that now the top part hides it, and now we can see the back of it. So this parallax just means that objects that are closer to the camera move faster than elements that are further away from the camera. Like when you look at this lettering for the tracking, you can see that the G passes faster through the frame as the T, because this T is supposed to be closer to the road. Also in this motion, you can see that the M has already passed the whole frame, while the N is still visible. We also have to take a look on how to deal with something that is moving in the frame, like the small cars here. So let's get started with tracking this footage clip. I have already opened it here in this new composition, of course without the lettering. And let's directly get started by applying the 3D camera tracker to it. And as I told you before, this is the built-in After Effects tracker, so all of you should have it. I just type in 3D camera tracker and there I have it. Now I can bring it onto the footage here, or I can drag it directly into the effects window, or I could drag it onto the footage clip. When I have selected the clip, I can also find it here on effects, perspective, 3D camera tracker. And by default, it already starts analyzing in background. And what this means is that you can walk on your composition or in After Effects while the camera tracker is tracking, which is really awesome. So you can scrub through the clip while he's doing it. You could also switch to another composition, like this one I showed you before. And if you would want to work on this while it is analyzing, you could also go into the advanced settings and hide the warning banner. And now it just looks like before, but it's analyzing in background, which is really cool. You also get a nice time indicator that shows you your progress. So at the moment we have about 25% of it analyzed, and it tells us that there are 2 minutes remaining. So really nice. And what I always do, I just show the warning banner, then I can work on it, and then I can see it when the warning banner disappears. I know that the analyzation has finished. Also nice to know is that the analyzing is step 1 of 2. So you're analyzing, and as a second step, it creates our 3D track. So when we are later on adjust some of those values here, you don't have to analyze it again. It's then just doing step 2 of 2, which is actually the creating of the 3D track. And it is finished with step 1, and now it is solving the camera, which is step 2 of 2. Now it tries to figure out where this aerial helicopter camera has been to shoot that kind of scene. For that, it takes all the tracking data that it has created. So now you can see all those small points, which are tracking points that After Effects automatically created. So After Effects looked for nice points to track and automatically tracks all of them. And then it creates the camera according to the movement of the tracking marker. As I told you before, those markers that are closer to the camera move faster, and the markers that are further away move slower. So this is how After Effects creates the camera and solves the camera. For example, when you take a look here, you can see that there are bigger tracking markers because After Effects thinks that they are closer to the camera because they are actually cars that are driving. And as they are driving faster than the road, of course, After Effects believes that they seem to be closer to the camera. So first thing that we have to do is we have to improve all of that. So let's get rid of all the points that are actually moving, which in this case are all the cars. And for that, we can just click on those points and hit the delete button. And as you can see, it's always solving the camera directly while we're deleting it. So let's just go to the beginning, play it, and every time when we see that there's a tracking point moving, we just click on it and delete it. And in the advanced settings, you also find this auto delete points across time, which means that when I am now deleting a point on that car, After Effects remembers that car and doesn't find it as a tracking point some frames later, which is really handy. Otherwise, you would have to delete the tracking point on the car each other frame. So a really handy button to have, and it is enabled by default. So let's quickly talk about all the settings you have. You have the shot type, which is also set by default to a fixed angle of view, which in this case means that it's a standard lens and there's no zooming going on. You could also take a zoom, or you can already tell After Effects which exact angle of view this was, but I just leave it at the default at a fixed angle of view. So for the tracking points, you can show them as a 3D solve, which means that the closer tracking points are already bigger, and you can define that over here. But you could also just show them as a 2D solve, which means you just get an indicator for each tracking point that After Effects finds for you. Which is sometimes handy when you have something moving and you don't want bigger tracking markers to be next to it, so it's just easier to see which are actually the moving ones. Now you can also see that all of those here are also moving because they get brighter as the camera passes, and so they think that this is also a movement. So let's just delete them. Okay, now in the advanced tappings you get the solve method, which is set to automatic by default. But if you would know what kind of camera movement this was, you can also choose those. So how do we get this data and how can we work with it? Well, that's pretty easy. We just have to create a camera, which is then supposed to make the same camera movement like in our footage material. So we hit create camera and we get the 3D tracker camera. So let me quickly show you what this camera looks like, or what After Effects has created for us. And for that, let me switch to another camera perspective, because at the moment we are at the active camera, which is our 3D tracker camera. So now let's go to something like the front view. Here we can see our camera, and when we click on it, we can see the path that the camera is moving along. So we click on it, and here we can see the field of view that the camera is seeing. So it's pointing to the bottom of the frame. When you imagine the camera to be placed on a helicopter, so the black would be the floor, and we can see that the camera is moving along that path, which is exactly the same like our helicopter camera is doing. The camera is flying in one direction and makes a small curve. So when we scrub through this, we can see that the camera is now following this path. And therefore, if we now create a 3D object or create an object and turn on the 3D switch, the object will be in that 3D space and the camera is flying around it. Like you see in this footage here, you can see that the camera is flying in a very small curve over this city. But now let's go back to the active camera, or in this case we can directly now choose our 3D tracker camera. And now as we have a camera in 3D space, we can start creating elements to check if our track is working in a correct way. For that, we once again click on our bird's view on our footage, click on the camera tracker to see all the points. And now we are just looking for some points that would create a plane. So maybe we take those 4 points. So I go back to the 3D solve. After Effects automatically tries to triangle between points, and those circles indicate directly the perspective, which comes in really handy. But I can also choose specific points that I want, and as I told you, I want to take those 4. I can just click on them while holding down Control, which will create this plane for me. And now I can right click on one of those buttons and create, for example, a null object that is positioned over there, or directly a solid, or a text layer. You could create a shadow catcher and light, which means that a plane is going to be created in that exact 3D position, and just the exact shadows will be on. So you could use it to cast shadows on the street. But I will talk a little bit more about that in a future tutorial. So in this one, let's just create text. And you can see that it automatically creates a text, and by double clicking on it, we can type in our own text and call this one the road. And make it smaller. And you can see that it's already a 3D layer. So we can position it in 3D space. But now we don't want to adjust the Z position, because now it should stick to the road, so it has the Z position of the road. Maybe still make it a little bit smaller by either scaling it down or decreasing the letter size. And now let's take a look. And it sticks to the road. So now that you can see that it is really a 3D camera track and not just a normal standard 2D track, we want to create a text that sits on top of those skyscrapers. So we once again click on the 3D camera tracker and try to find some points that are on top of the skyscraper, which should be those 4 points, and try to create another plane or another text out of this, and call this sky. Also position this, and you can also see that it has created this text layer a little bit in a perspective angle, which should be right because this skyscraper looks taller than this one. So let's bring it in between those two, and once again play our clip. And you can see that the sky is moving faster than the road because it's closer to the camera, and it really looks very convincing. So if this would just be a normal 2D track that you would have created in After Effects or Mocha or any other 2D tracking program, then the movement would be exactly the same like the road, so you wouldn't get any parallax at all. Or what you would have to do, you would have to track this part of the road to get the road text in there, and then you would have to track this skyscraper and put in the sky. But with this 3D track you can now put stuff everywhere. You could put a branding over here. So you could, for example, create another plane with those tracking markers. So let's quickly do this just to show it to you. Try to get somehow the same points to create another plane that sticks to the skyscrapers. And this time I'll create a solid and take the mask tool and try to get some kind of cloud going on here. I have to say that this is not the best cloud I have ever created, but just want to show you what you're able to do with this 3D track. So now this is positioned on top of the skyscrapers, and I can go to the Z position and just bring it closer to the camera, feather it, make it a little bit more transparent, and of course we want to tint it a little bit so that it's not yellow but some kind of white. And now we should see some clouds passing by. Really nice. You could bring in some kind of helicopter or maybe Superman, whatever you could think of into this, and everything would look like it really sits in 3D space and is tracked perfectly. So some other nice things to think about before I am finishing this tutorial would be that you can also create some light which will also react in 3D space. just going to layer, new, light, and then you could just create a light, and you can immediately see that the light is somewhere closer to the road than to the sky, and you can position the light wherever you want it, and everything should react to the light. You can tint the light to get the same orange lighting situation, maybe with the color picker. Then you grab some kind of this floor light that you have there. And the next tip that I would have for you is that you could play with the camera settings, so you could turn on depth of field and play with the focus distance together with the aperture. So the higher the aperture, the more blurriness you get. And then you can just play with the focus distance. So now you can see that whatever is closer to the camera reacts like a real camera would react, because the camera that has filmed the footage material was focused on the ground. So the road is sharp and the sky gets out of focus. Of course, you could fine-tune that with the aperture settings. Just make this a saddle effect. But as you have seen in my example, I really played with it. And you can see that the G of the tracking is really out of focus, and also parts of the motion start to get out of focus, while the bottom parts of them are still in focus. So I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and learned some interesting stuff about 3D motion tracking, so that you now just open up your After Effects and start tracking 3D space.